Hey everybody, thank you for tuning in to another video. My name's Jake Burdett. Please subscribe if you want to follow more about Maryland and Lower Shore politics. So we've got a pretty scary one to report on today, as you could read the title here. KKK flyers found in Maryland and Delaware. So let's read into it a little bit. So it says a recent spate of Ku Klux Klan flyers were discovered in Maryland and have now made their way to the state's eastern shore and into parts of Delaware. A man posted to Facebook on Sunday morning that he and a neighbor discovered flyers in the driveways of their homes in the Princess Anne area that had been placed inside plastic bags containing what appeared to be birdseed. So it looks like they got a picture here. We could read what the KKK advertisement said. The KKK wants you. White brothers and sisters, there is nothing hateful in showing pride for your race. The liberals have gone to a great deal of effort to make us feel ashamed of our own race. The blacks are saying black pride. The Latinos are saying brown pride. There's nothing wrong with us saying white pride. Help us win back your rights. So I saw other pictures on Facebook of other flyers that the KKK had made and were handing out on the Lower Shore and other places in Maryland. And it was actually like a slightly different flyer, but oddly enough, it's almost always in bird seed and rocks or whatever that is. I don't know why that's their signature thing, why they would put their advertisements in the bird seed or whatever. But here's the other one on Facebook that I saw. This message has been brought to you by loyal white knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And I always found it like funny that they call themselves like loyal white knights and like the leaders of the KKK. I think they're called like Grand Dragons or Grand Wizards, or like if you wanted to take yourself seriously as an organization, like why would you name yourself after what sounds like fucking like Dungeons and Dragons characters? But you know, that aside, at first they actually had like the phone number to call on there because that's like their recruitment tools. They go around and hand out these flyers. I don't think they like ring doorbells or like actually talk to people at the doors because I think they know that they would get run out of the neighborhood if they did that. I think they just leave it there, and then interested people call them back, I guess. But as you can see, there's the birdseed. But of course, they're bitching about, it's the holiday seasons and people aren't saying Merry Christmas anymore. They're saying Happy Holidays, and that's what the KKK finds morally reprehensible. That's what they need to take a stand on, is people not saying Merry Christmas. There's 45,000 a year people dying because they don't have access to health care in America. But the KKK, they're cool with that. But if you don't say Christmas, now there they have a problem with you. So that seems to be their recruiting tool on these posters. It says, America finds Jesus offensive. Join the KKK. Fuck black people. That's their recruiting tool. But anyways, let's read on. And in Princess Anne, that's in Somerset County, right next to Wacomico County, where Salisbury is. I'm actually like pretty familiar with Princess Anne in Somerset County because the guy Kirkland Hall, whose campaign I managed, who was running for state delegate a couple months ago, he's from Princess Anne, and yeah, there is a large black community in Somerset County and in Princess Anne, so it is scary that the KKK is recruiting there and handing out these flyers. There's a big black community, but also, like, of course, a lot of, racist white people as well. So hopefully this is not a successful recruiting mission, but who knows? It's pretty scary. But to read on, so the flyer claimed to be from the loyal white knights of the KKK. Its message criticized how many people referred to the Christmas season as simply the holidays. So outrage. Because you gotta say Merry Christmas. That's the shit that they get mad about. But, yeah, Somerset County Sheriff Ronnie Howard said while the flyers had not been directly reported to his office, he had talked to Princess Anne Police Chief Timothy Bosman about propaganda that showed up in town limits early Sunday. Bosman said his department received multiple reports of flyers left in yards between Saturday night and Sunday morning, and the incidents don't appear to be isolated as they have occurred in other Maryland towns in the last few months. So yeah, this was not just an isolated incident. Didn't just happen in Princess Anne. In fact, as we see here, in November, various Maryland law enforcement agencies looked into reports of similar flyers discovered in multiple places, including Ellicott City, where I'm originally from in Howard County, Sykesville, Eldersburg, and Glen Burnie, according to media reports. So at first when I heard about this, I had heard it was just Princess Anne, which made sense that it would be on the eastern shore, very conservative part of Maryland. They have active KKK in Cecil County at the top right corner of the eastern shore. So it made sense that this type of thing would happen occasionally in like rural America. But, you know, it's even more alarming that it's now happening in like Ellicott City. You know, that's like the suburbs. That's the western. All these places are on the western shore, like cities. So it's not just rural Maryland that this is happening in. But yeah, while the flyer posted to social media focused its message around Christmas, Bosman said the other KKK propaganda reported seemed to be aimed at recruiting new members. So, yeah, this is basically the KKK equivalent of canvassing, like a recruitment canvas. I think if you call the number that was on the thing, it just goes to a message, and then they probably vet you and look you up to make sure that you're an actual like racist, a real KK. They want real racists in the KKK, not that fake racist shit. So they probably just don't want people infiltrating their group, like in the that Black Klansman movie that just came out. But yeah, because the investigation determined there are no active Klan chapters on the lower shore comprised of Wacomico, Worcester, and Somerset counties, he said the flyers are believed to have originated from a chapter in the Western Shore or Southern Maryland. So yeah, I've heard similar things that I don't know how people know this, but they're pretty sure that the heart of this, statewide recruitment drive is coming out of Annapolis or Anne Arundel County, is what I've heard. I haven't seen evidence to prove that, but I've also heard someone told me yesterday that there actually is sort of an underground KKK network in Somerset County, and they're just not super visible and outspoken publicly like the one in Cecil County in the top right of the Eastern Shore is. So I don't know if that's true that there is one in Somerset County or in Princess Anne, but that's what I've heard. But yeah, the individuals who left the flyers are not expected to return, Bosman said, but Princess Anne residents are still being encouraged to report any suspicious activity or vehicles. So I guess we'll have to keep our eyes open these next couple months, see if this type of behavior continues, because it sounds like it's been happening in other parts of the state for the past couple months. So hopefully this is not a regular thing. But yeah, as we can see, it wasn't even just in Maryland. It was in Delaware, happened in Seaford, right over the Maryland-Delaware border. And yeah, the timing of this, I don't know if this was planned or if it was just a coincidence, but flyers delivery comes close to Salisbury lynching anniversary. The arrival of these flyers in the Delmarva region falls just before a vigil to mark the anniversary of the December 4th, 1931 lynching of Matthew Williams in Salisbury. I actually went to the memorial for it 2 days ago. It's if you don't know the backstory, I didn't know all of the backstory until I went and saw the memorial and read it, but really fucked up in 1931, which is insane on its own to know that, look, Princess Anne is also the site of the October 18th, 1933 lynching of George Armwood, which was the last recording lynching in Maryland's history. So it's really scary to think that black people were being like hanged publicly, just for nothing other than being black. That was less than 100 years ago. So maybe some of our grandparents, definitely our great grandparents, were alive during this time, and even after the lynching stopped, like black people were still legally speaking second class citizens until the mid 1960s. So we like to think that all this stuff happened so long ago, but it was really less than 100 years ago. But yeah, the details of the Matthew Williams one are particularly horrific. I think the guy, Matthew Williams, I think he was just like a teenager, or like a really young man, anyways. And he got accused of killing his boss. His boss got killed, and then I think in those times people would just jump to conclusions and were looking to blame black people for anything and everything. So immediately they just blamed the boss getting killed on one of the black employees, and the town just immediately decides that he's guilty. There's no trial or anything. No evidence is reviewed. They just come to the collective conclusion that, yeah, this black guy definitely did it. Let's go shoot him. So they went and they shot him, and then obviously he went to the hospital. He's still alive. An angry mob gathered outside of the hospital, went in, like stormed the hospital, dragged the dude out of the hospital, were beating him up and stuff. I don't know if they killed him and then lit his body on fire, or if they lit his body on fire and then killed him, but his body was definitely lit on fire at one point. They eventually hung him from a tree right on the courthouse lawn. I think that might have been how they killed him, is they hung him on the courthouse tree, and then after they killed him and burned his body, they tied him to the front or the back of a car and then drove his body around for the whole town to see. And then so this was like a several hour long like public murder and lynching and beating up of someone who did not even have a trial. His guilt was presumed. And then after his body was driven around in the car, I think they hung him from a lamppost on the streets. And there's like hundreds of people watching all this happen in the 1930s, just cheering it on, okay with it. Not a single one of them testified. So there are hundreds of witnesses to see that this man was publicly murdered, lynched, and executed, and not a single one of them would testify to say that it happened. So no one was ever held responsible for it. But yeah, that's not the main point of the story. But it is weird timing that right when they're having the memorial for Matthew Williams' public lynching, that's when they hand out the flyers. But probably wasn't planned, probably just a coincidence. But yeah, the region has a complex relationship with race relations, from heated debates over the question of removing a marker dedicated to a Confederate general that sits on the courthouse lawn where Williams was lynched, to the presence in Sussex County of a Klan leader for the East Coast Knights of the True Invisible Empire. So yeah, there's another example. The East Coast Knights of the True Invisible Empire. Again, the KKK naming their shit after like what sounds like Star Wars. But yeah, this is a serious issue actually. The question of removing a marker dedicated to a Confederate general that sits on the courthouse lawn where Matthew Williams was lynched. So right where that guy I just told you about, the Matthew Williams guy who was like dragged out of the hospital and hung from a tree on the courthouse lawn, to this day, right where Matthew Williams was lynched, they have a memorial plaque sign thing for this guy named Confederate General John Winder, who was obviously a general for the Confederacy that fought to keep slavery. Obviously all Confederate people were bad because they were fighting for slavery, but Confederate General John Winder was uniquely bad even for the Confederacy, because he was in charge of running the Confederacy prison camps where they kept Union soldiers, and he essentially ran them like a concentration camp. If you look up if you look up General John Winder, they had like a nickname for people who went to his prison camp as prisoners. They would say, "Oh, that prisoner got windered," which meant like because he ran at like a concentration camp. After an extended period of time being a prisoner at his camps, you would be skinny as fuck and look like legitimately a concentration camp victim before the Holocaust happened, though. But yeah, it was this guy was so notorious that they made up a name. You got windered, and even in his time, he was like hated. It's not like one of those things of like, oh, it was considered normal at the time. Like, no, this dude, he died before he ever went to trial, but it's believed that he would have been given the death penalty after the Civil War ended, just because this guy's crimes were so brutal. But yeah, so for that asshole, there's now a memorial plaque sitting on the courthouse lawn where that Matthew Williams guy was lynched. And that was put in during like right after the civil rights movement, and the schools were being integrated with the white and black schools mixing and no longer being segregated. So it's believed that they put the Confederate General Winder plaque on the courthouse lawn as a symbolic like fuck you to the black people of Salisbury, saying like, yeah, we know civil rights are a thing now, but you're still not welcomed here, you're still not wanted here. Remember what happened here in 1931, and remember like that we support the Confederacy or whatever, even though the Confederate General John Winder was not even from Wacomico County. So the plaque does not belong there. But it's still there to this day, and it's a debated issue in the community. The county council, if they wanted to, could take it down tomorrow, but they don't want to take it down tomorrow because they low-key support that type of thing, unfortunately. But yeah, Shore activist Amber Green, who I actually know, said this isn't the first time she's heard about Klan propaganda or talk of whether the group is active in Princess Anne area. She said her initial reaction to these most recent incidents was, here we go again. The first time she said she heard about it was around 2009 while she was a student at UMES, a historically black institution in Princess Anne that opened its doors more than 130 years ago. After she graduated, Green said she heard about it again around 2014 from students who were still at UMES. I'm not surprised, she said Monday afternoon, of the flyers reported to police over the weekend. So, yeah, this is not unprecedented. This is not the first time that it's happened. But this time is, at least feels a little different, a little more serious, a little scarier, because as she goes on. However, she said she does feel that the situation is more serious now that reports of KKK literature have popped up recently in other parts of Maryland. So before it was just isolated to just Princess Anne, but now they're obviously a lot more organized and bigger in numbers than they used to be, because now they're doing it in Howard County, they're doing it in all over the Eastern Shore, they're doing it in different states now, in Delaware, so they're definitely expanding, so this is not a good sign at all. But in the past, Green said the conversation around these kinds of flyers has labeled them a hoax and quickly let them go. But she hopes this time the Princess Anne community will take this opportunity to have an open dialogue addressing issues of racism and racial tensions. And yeah, even though there is a large black community in Princess Anne, there's still a lot of racism and racial tensions that I think definitely worked against us in the Kirkland campaign, because Kirkland is a black man who's outspoken on black representation and getting justice for minority communities. So yeah, I think a lot of people probably felt threatened by having a guy like Kirkland run, and that probably hurt us, unfortunately. But he would have been a great representative. And then the last thing here is, I was saying earlier, there's an active like public chapter of the KKK in Cecil County. And it looks like they have a 1:30 interview with the guy Tom Larson, Imperial Wizard of the East Coast Knights of the True Invisible Empire, which I promise you I'm not making that up. It deadass says that here. And again, sounds like a fucking Dungeons and Dragons thing. But no, that's really what they call themselves, and they say it with a straight face. Imperial Wizard. Magic. But yeah, so they talk to him. Let's hear what he has to say. The interview everyone's been waiting on.
I came from nothing and to
The
not
ad. Sorry.
being a GM and having my college degree. I was given all that help, and sometimes people, that's all they need.
McDonald's, what a great corporation. Sarcasm. Fuck McDonald's. I eat there, but fuck them. They don't pay their workers a living wage.
Want people to fear of. People keep saying these things, but in the last several decades, where's the Klan really done anything bad, broken the law? You can't go back to the 60s or 50s where things were done. That was 80 years ago. And with times we changed.
He just said this. The 1960s was 80 years ago. I know that's me nitpicking, but he's also acting like the KKK. We've come a long way. We don't publicly hang black people anymore. Okay, we're basically the ACLU now. Like he's trying to act like, oh, we're just the civil, peace loving group. We just sit around at campfires and sing Kumbaya and talk about how much we hate minorities. Yeah.
With the times, we're a Christian-based, family-oriented organization. Of course, people don't want to hear that, but that's what we are. You don't see us being locked up every week. We're not out there destroying property or frightening people. But like I say, the biggest thing we do is literature drives, and that does take some people up. They see a fire in their yard. But nobody's there to hurt them. We're just letting them know that we're around. We've been around for 160 years, and we're going to stay around. And we're going to do what we have to do to protect our race and our country. It's not just about the blacks.
It's not just about the blacks. It's about the Jews and the Mexicans and the Muslims too. That's what this guy's thinking. But listen to just how he frames it. It's about protecting the race. These guys have the biggest victim complexes ever. Black people are literally being killed unarmed by the police, but they somehow trick themselves into thinking, no, the white man is the victim. And white people in many ways are victims. If you're not in the top 1% class, you're still a victim of massive economic oppression. So white people do have legitimate problems that need to be addressed in this country, but those real problems that you have in your life are not the fault of the people beneath you on the socioeconomic ladder. It's the fault of the people in power who, guess what, are white. And I'm not saying all white people are to blame, but the rich people are the people in power are the ones that are oppressing you. It's not the Mexicans taking your jobs. It's not the immigrants. It's not the poor minorities taking advantage of welfare systems. It's none of those things. Those aren't real problems. They're greatly over exaggerated. The real problems are the people who actually have power in society to make these changes that would make your life better, but are choosing not to because they don't give a fuck about you. But these guys are just can't see past the race thing. They think it's all the whites versus the blacks, not it's the 99% versus the 1%. So these guys just have it totally ass backwards.
It's about the whole movement in this country, the immigration. We don't go out after anybody because of their race or their religion.
Yeah, the KKK would never stoop that low to go after race or religion. It's not like that's what they're known for and have been known for over 100 years. This guy's really trying hard with the propaganda here, which is weird that this news outlet would even interview him and give him a platform, but whatever.
But leave us live the way we want to live. Don't force something on us, and don't keep taking from us. I mean, since the 60s, everything has been taken from the white man. I mean, test scores for.
Again, the victim complex. Meanwhile, they're trying to victimize people. They're organizing to try to keep minorities down. So they're victimizing people while claiming to be the victims.
Government jobs, police jobs, they've all been lowered so that other nationalities can pass these tests. That's a proven factor.
So he's complaining basically about affirmative action, that minorities don't have to meet as high standards as white people to get jobs. And his claim would probably be, well, they have to lower the standards because black people don't perform as well on tests. And it's odd that he doesn't then say, why are black people and minorities performing worse on these things? Why are they making less money? Why are they doing all of these things? Well, he probably does ask those questions, but the difference between someone like him and I is he sees those stats that minorities are doing less on those measurements, and he says, okay, I guess that means that those groups are just inherently inferior. They're born dumber and slower and stupider. When me, on the other hand, and what progressives do is we see those things and we say, okay, that must mean that the system is not giving those people the same opportunities, the same educational access, the same support structures to allow them to thrive. Essentially, that the system is rigged against them, and that's why you're seeing these results. But he never would even dare to come to that conclusion. He just would jump to, oh, well, white people just obviously must be better. Meanwhile, they ignore all the tons of dumb, stupid white people that commit crime that there are, and they only because they're such tribalists, they only focus on, the minority of black people and Mexicans that commit crimes, because it is just a minority of those groups that are committing crimes and whatnot. But he blows it out of proportion and ignores white crime. But then he doesn't see that it's within those groups, the people who are committing those crimes are the people that don't have money. Because anyone, whether you're white or black or Mexican or whatever, if you're born in an environment where you're surrounded by nothing but crime and poverty, surprise, surprise, people are products of their environment. They're more likely to lead and go down that path of crime and poverty, and that's why the cycle of poverty is so hard to break. But the point is, it's a systemic issue. It's not that one group is born more likely to commit crime or be dumber. But of course, I'm sure all of you know this. I'm just preaching to the choir.
So we just want to live in peace and don't tread on us. That's the message.
We just want to live in peace, and then he's going to end it with a threat. Don't you dare tread on us. But yeah, so that was his comments. And what is my overall takeaway from this? Well, for several months, they have been doing recruitment and canvassing drives and lit drops in several counties, several shores, in several states. So a widespread operation that covers, many miles of territory, many different counties, many different regions and cultures, and they've been doing this sustained for several months now. So that shows to me there's a lot more of these guys than there used to be, and they're a hell of a lot more organized than they used to be. And what do we need to do? We have to out-organize them. These extremist right-wingers, they're growing in numbers, unfortunately, and we just have to outwork them. We have to out-organize them, which should be easy because our message appeals to a lot more people. But we can't afford to just keep sitting around and talking like we actually have. What they're doing with lit drops for the KKK, we need to do that shit, but we need to do it for the Lower Shore Progressive Caucus. We need to do it for our revolution. We need to do it for all these activist leftist groups. Because the KKK is not sitting around and just talking. The KKK is trying to do shit. It just happens that their agenda is evil, and it's they just want white people to rule everything. So we need to outwork them, because they're clearly not taking this like a joke, and we can't either, because if we sit back and just watch this happen, they're going to grow in numbers, and they're going to grow in power, and they're going to get more people elected than us. And I mean, we already have a lot of white supremacy in the system. We don't need any more of that. So the left has to get its shit together. If you're watching this and you agree with progressive ideology, but you mostly just share stuff on Facebook and whatnot, like, start getting involved. Go to your local Our Revolution or Progressive Maryland chapter. Do something, because we can't sit around and just let these guys out-organize us. So that's my takeaway. But yeah, scary stuff. KKK in Howard County, where I'm from. KKK in Wacomico County, or in Somerset County, where I am now. So shit's getting bad. We need to get our shit together. Have a good night, everybody.